Welcome to USA Wrestling's National Coaches Council Heads Up Podcast. I'm Mike Clayton with Mike Hagerty, and boy, have we got a show for you today. We were just talking on the intro, Mike, that if these two don't, there's a little competition because Brian Kenny down in Texas has the number one downloads for us. So we're going to see if the two of you can beat Brian on this episode. No,
we want to win. We want to win. We have to win. Yes. So let's go.
That's what the whole book's about. I've been looking at it's about being elite, right? And going to that next level. So we're going to do that with the podcast today. And we're going to figure out how to do that from Tom Ryan, head coach at Ohio State. And Sarah Doty, who's running the girls program at Edwardsville's, at the wrestling club at Edwardsville. How does that work, Sarah?
Yeah, so it's Edwardsville Wrestling Club that I work with, but I help out at the other levels, middle school and high school. And then we also have a Southern Illinois RTC down here. And
you've been working on your silver certification. You did a book report on Tom's book, Chosen Suffering. And man, you know, what I love about our certification programs is that we really get to know the people, all right, that are behind sometimes these facades that can be a coach. I know, Tom, you talk about, you know, what people start to identify you as, right? As wrestler, as coach, as things like that. And that's really that we're so much more. So Sarah was working on this. She talked about the book, and we just said, we got to get Tom Ryan on here and let's talk about this book and how Sarah's perspective helped to kind of bring this all about. So, Sarah, do you mind if we just kind of jump in and sorry, Coach Hag, do you want to say hi?
No,
Hello?
Not really.
Yeah.
I'm just so impressed that you took the intro. This is two podcasts in a row, Mike, that you jumped in and absolutely nailed it. So I'm just going to sit here and scratch my head and keep moving. Let's go.
Well, after the first one, I was so scared. I thought if I don't do it right away on the second one, if I'm falling off the horse, I'll never get back on. So.
Well, it was perfect. On cue. Well done, brother.
So, Sarah, how did this influence you and how did this come around?
So it was actually during COVID. We really wanted to just do something with our coaches to bring them together. And my boss, Pat McNamara, who works at the club as well, found Chosen Suffering, the book that Tom Ryan wrote. And we all read it together. And it was really impactful for all of us. We met once a week and went through each chapter. And it was really great.
That's really cool. Coach Hagerty, you've probably had a few books that have influenced you and a few coaches that have kind of weighed in on your life. How does Tom Ryan fit into that crowd?
I think Tom, this isn't your first book though, right? I mean, you've produced a few books along the way, and this one, the one that sort of interests me about the thing about this is that it really does sort of get into those peripherals of things outside of just the elements of coaching. So that sort of, to me, always is exciting. We can read coaching books forever and ever, but I think, there's this old adage about, coaches tend to learn from people in the business community, and people in the business community tend to learn things from coaches. And I think there's something to be said about that. But, again, Tom, congratulations on this book, as well as all of your other accolades and books that you've written and things you've done. But this is special. And I would just pulled it up and just kind of see what it's doing on the Amazon track. And at 4.8 on Amazon and 87% 5 stars, I mean, a lot of people are really enjoying this book.
Well, my family, I make sure they all do reviews.
well done.
That's good to know. I didn't know that. That's good to hear. Yeah, and then Sarah was, it's always, heartwarming to hear when leaders in the community, find, take something from it, that it blesses them in some way. So, I jokingly say too that, it really came out at a good time. COVID was in play, right? People were longing for a couple things. And one is there was a sense of, kind of boredom, right? So, what are we going to do with our time? So that's a perfect time to read a book. And then also, there was a longing for toilet paper, so if things got hard and the book wasn't so good, you had some. So, perfect timing. It was dual purpose. So I don't know, how many read it and how many used it in another way, but I'm glad that this group found it, somewhat beneficial. And, and I know Coach Hagerty, I've written a couple just books on just technique and positions, but this one was really obviously pretty heartfelt and far deeper, right? It kind of digs deep into our I believes, right? Our belief system, and what is it that we actually believe, and why do we believe it, and how sure are we that what we believe is worthy, and then stacking that against right actions, and that gap between what we believe and what we're doing, that's a gap that right every one of us as human beings right struggle with, right? I believe this, my actions are this. Well, how can I narrow that gap? And I think the book, I think this book addresses that. And again, it was hard to write. It was personal, and it was right. Fundamentally, it was just founded in brokenness, right? I've been broken a couple of times in the Iowa wrestling room, and I've been broken by a coach and maybe an official here or there, but mostly in the wrestling room. And there was no time in my life that would even compare to the brokenness that I experienced right in 2004. And it was from that brokenness that that was kind of the impetus of assessing chosen and unchosen suffering and how they play a role in our lives.
Tom, you talk in the book, and I've heard you on other podcasts, and you say that all those other challenges that you had in life, after you had the challenge, you were able to say, why did that happen? We hear a lot now about know your why before you start a business, know your why before you jump into an adventure that takes you on your goal. You were able to talk about a why, and I thought that was a really interesting perspective about, well, I went into that Iowa practice and Terry Steiner really gave it to me today. Why did that happen? Right? You were looking for the why and analyzing. We were just out in Chula Vista, the training center out there, and they talk about plan, do, act, and then learn. Right? So you've got to go through these processes, and then you got to learn. And your why was a lot about learning. But then you said in this situation, like you couldn't see anything to learn from. You didn't know why this suffering had happened. And how do you feel? Would it be okay talking a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, nothing's off limits, with me.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So, so I think you point out an interesting, you make an interesting, assessment, and that's just right. The hunger for truth, right? And a lot of us, we can kind of make up what the truth is in our lives, right? But it takes someone really, it takes someone in a situation that's really unique to have people around them give them truth, right? But also deeply long for just truth. And, it was truth that I was after, when I went to University of Iowa, it was truth that I was after, and whether or not Christ is who he said he is, right? I wasn't going to be swayed by anything other than, let me dig in and really find out truth. The night that the Steiner brothers, my first workout in the Iowa wrestling room gave me truth. I didn't look for excuses, right? It was, okay, well, assessing this particular practice, I did really well for about 2 minutes, right? And then after 2 minutes, I started to get tired. And, I did really well, every shot I took, I got in, but I couldn't finish. And truth is just assessing, okay, they're more fit than me, they're stronger than me, they're more technical than me, what can I do, right? What's next? Not like kind of why me, but what's next? And I think that's that was an important, role, that played a very important role for me when real tragedy hit. You hear a lot of coaches, and I believe this, and I know that Sarah, you obviously believe this, right? And Coach Hagerty, wrestling is a relatively safe environment to learn life lessons. Like the worst thing that can happen to you is you can lose. And that's painful, but my God, right? If the worst thing that can ever happen to any of us is that we lose a match, we're obviously pretty fortunate. So it's a great environment to be in the sport of wrestling because it makes you really deeply self-assess, right? And self-assessment is hard and it's ugly and it's a lot easier to look in someone else's mirror than your own. But wrestling does that, and this book for me just touches on that, right? I had to really dig deep about this unchosen suffering that I want to know part of, right? To your point, right? Why? But really, it's not like why me, but it's like what's next. What's the what's next approach? This is awful and this is heartbreaking, and right? I have people, I was curled up in a ball for days, but you've got to figure out, okay, how do I make sense of this? And sometimes you don't, but you got to approach it that way. And that's what I did, right? That's what I did from a wrestling standpoint. And really that's what I did from, where's Teague standpoint.
Hey, Tom, quick question. And it's one thing to have these ideas and these thoughts and sort of formulate them and apply those to your own life. What was the desire to get that out and portray it in a form of a book?
I mean, I think I think people that know me well would say, I think I grew up in an amazing home, right? I got an amazing mom, that was a waitress that to me, was the king of the world, right? I mean, I never judged her on what her title was, right? I assessed her on the love she gave and how she treated people, all the things that really matter. So I think I was raised in just a very humble, home. So writing a book, this type of a book, was hard for me because one, it's not about me, right? And I had to get past that fact that this wasn't about me at all. This was, a lot of donors heard me speak, and friends that have heard me speak, they're like, listen, you should really just tell your story. And I'm like, I'm not into that. So I think that was the biggest hurdle for me. And that was also the foundation of why it's like, a lot of people struggle and maybe you could help them in some way with their struggle. And obviously a lot of people help a lot of people in their struggle. And maybe I could just be one person that, ultimately, right, if you can make a difference in the life of just one person, they read it and they're like, wow, I can relate to that. Well, then maybe it was worth it. I think that the big struggle for me, again, was just the ego-ness of it, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that have done a lot greater things and been through a lot harder things that didn't write a book. So that was a struggle. But people closest to me that I really trusted, said to do it, and I did it.
But you talked about time. I've heard you talk a lot about time and we're impatient. It's the world of we want everything now. My app downloads now. If it doesn't download in 1 second, I'm going to be pissed that it's not 3 seconds. Oh my God, the world ended. You talked about relationships. That 25% of relationships now, your best friend is someone you may never have met because you're online. It used to be maybe some letters and stuff. How important has the time since 2004 been in determining that why? I know when we're in the corner and if somebody calls you a wrestler for stalling with 30 seconds into the match, you probably aren't that stressed. But boy, when they call them with 30 seconds left in the match, I've only got 30 seconds and time gets a lot tougher. How did the time help you understand or see that why? And based on your beliefs, is this something you feel that was this something that you had to go through, or is this something that chosen versus not chosen? I guess I just kind of throw that back to you. How do you view this? Right? No rights or wrongs, your perspective.
Yeah. I mean, just, I think we all have you got to go back to our belief system. We need to know what it is. And, everyone has one, right? Everyone has a belief system. And typically if I followed someone or they followed me around for a month or a year or a couple months, they would be able to see what my belief system is based on the choices I make, right? How I live my life. Ultimately, I'm living a belief system. So, in 2004, and then the foundational piece of this book, chosen suffering is something that we all in the sport of wrestling know well, right? Sarah knows it well. Mike knows it well. Mike, you know it well, right? You know what this chosen discomfort is like. Right, we immerse ourselves in it and we long for it because it's in that suffering, right? And its root is love, right? Suffering's root is love. So it's in this love that we learn the most, right, about ourselves, and so that makes sense to us, to every wrestler in the country. You could ask them, right, every elite level wrestler, or even good wrestler, or average wrestler, or beginner, right? At some point, I'm choosing this suffering because it's fun. I love it, right? But it is suffering. It's very hard. It's very difficult, right? And it's in those darkest and the practice moments when we learn the most about ourselves. And it makes sense. The problem is that, right, unfortunately, we're faced with a lot more unchosen suffering than chosen. And how do you make sense of it? You know, and for me in my life, I was really blessed. You know, look, I grew up in a nice neighborhood, right? I'm not in a war-torn region, right? I mean, it was easy to be focused in wrestling. I had a great family, great home life. There was no stress at home. It was easy to really hone in on what I loved and be really selfish in some way about the sport of wrestling and really be able to develop. And then all of us get hit with unchosen suffering, which was, for me, was just, you know, the backbone of the book was in February 16, 2004, when I lost a 5-year-old healthy son to a massive heart attack at the dinner table. You know, that made no sense to me, right? That was the unthinkable. It was, it was a guarantee in my life, right? In all of our lives, that we will never bury our children. Our children bury us, right? That's a rite of passage of being a human being. Well, it is in America, but it's not in most countries, right? It is in Wantagh, New York, where I grew up, but it isn't in many other parts of the world. So it was me wrestling with this, you know, this unthinkable situation that occurred at my dinner table with my 3 other children watching and my wife there, and how do you move forward, right? And it was coming home from the hospital as I drove up to my house. It was my one of my sons, I have 3 and a daughter, asking me, where's Teague? Right? They stayed back at the house when the ambulance rushed him to the hospital. So we pulled in, and, you know, there's only 2 of us in the car. Where is he? And that became, right, the foundational piece of how could I possibly be able to answer. I could answer most questions for my kids. I could tell them, right, how many donors I had, the names of the donors, right? I could tell them every tendency of every guy on my team, right? I could tell them every recruit I had. I could tell them the best state. There's a lot of information I could have shared, but the fact that I had not settled death, which is coming for all of us, like, that was like a wow moment for me. That was wow. You know, you've been leading people for 12, 13 years, and you don't know the single, you know, you haven't even dug in on the single greatest question that all of us have to answer. And that's, how do we get here and where are we going? Right? The day we find out our purpose. And that was my journey, right? That was the gift. That was the gift of the most painful moment in my life, of losing my son. And where do you go from here? And it simply was, okay, where's Teague? Where could he be? So you grab a piece of paper and you write where it could be, right? Either he's in heaven or he's not. Either there's an end to it. Either there was a divine beginning or there wasn't. And let me study this for the first time in my life and come up with. There's data, there's information on each side. And the more I studied, the more I looked at both sides, right? Pure evolution or divinity, some special, unique beginning. It seemed to me that the facts were overwhelming on the side of God. And that's when I dropped to my knees and welcomed him into my life.
During that search, Tom, did you have anyone that kind of mentored you or encouraged you? And where did you start? I mean, you kind of talked about writing on a piece of paper, but where did you go?
Sarah, I could cry right now from that question. I mean, the thoughts are overwhelming, quite frankly. Like, you hit me with a question that just, you know, it sears me in that time frame. Look, it was 18 years ago, right? Teague would be 23 now, right? His best friend and cousin just graduated from Stanford. He's playing in the pros. He's a pro soccer player. Zach Ryan's my brother's kid. They were the same age, right? They were buddies. You know, and I followed his career, and I follow him all the time because he's a reflection of, you know, what you think as a parent, right? What would have been, right? Maybe not a soccer player, but a champion this or, you know, champion that, right? I had him figured out already. He had the footwork, right, and the balance, and, you know, we placed them in categories at a young age of, you know, what they're going to be stars at, which is demented, but we do it. And so what happened was, at the funeral, a man named Greg Truns gave me a book. 2 things happened. This was the first thing. He gave me a book, and he wrote in the book, book's called Someday Heaven. And in the book he wrote, and I went through all this stuff after the funeral, these gifts that we were getting. And I went through this book and I found this one. And he said, Tom, my name's Greg. I own the Swan Club. Your team has been there for dinner. I was coaching at Hofstra at the time, 2004, as the head coach at Hofstra. I was in maybe my 9th year. And he said, Tom, I wrestled. I own the Swan Club. You know, your team's been there. I wrestled. And I lost a daughter to brain cancer at a very young age. If you ever want to talk, call me. He left me his number. And, you know, I trend toward wrestlers in my life because I think they're just tough people. I'm addicted to tough people that like getting uncomfortable. So I like to trend toward those people. And then 2, at this time in my life, I only wanted to be associated with people at this time that went through what I went through, right? The only people that I could really relate to, and it wasn't necessarily clear thinking, but I wanted to be around people that had lost children. And I wanted to know what it was like. And I tried, there's a couple of organizations we tried, but there were some that were, 30 years removed and they seemed like they haven't moved forward. So I stopped being part of that, right? I didn't want to be in the poor me, why me group. But I called this guy Greg, and I would meet with him on my way from Hauppauge to Hofstra University. His Swan Club was maybe 10, 15 minutes out of the way. And we would meet in the basement of his we would meet in the basement of his restaurant, and he would just share with me. And it was like, imagine, right? Your daughter starts wrestling, your son starts wrestling, and it's like day one in the room, and they love it, and they're just learning stance and motion, and they're overwhelmed with learning, and they come home in the car ride, they're asking you questions. And for me, even though I was raised Catholic in a Catholic home, and Mom took me to church, every week, I was in so much pain. I was in such a bad place, and I longed for truth so deeply that every word he said, I was just hung on to. And he's the guy. Greg Truns is the one that really mentored me and started me moving. He gave me book after book and, DVDs. And I'd listen to, at the time my car was a cassette tape, and I would listen to cassette tapes on people that believed and how they, came to be there. And I studied people with, perfect scores on their ACTs and with brilliant minds and that were believers, and how could, I wanted to make sure that, because I'm, at average intelligence, I want to make sure that someone of real intelligence couldn't get duped. Maybe they can see things the way I can. So I went to people, far smarter than me, and what do they believe? And, at some point, it really got overwhelming, and it's like, this seems pretty clear. I don't know if you're familiar with Occam's razor. But it's basically the most simple answer is typically it's typically the one. And we can complicate it, and we can try to throw all sorts of wacky equations into it. And what about this and what about that? But the reality is when you look at it, it seems pretty basic. So the short, long answer is Greg Truns, who I stay in touch with to this day. Amazing human being. And then look, there's many others, right? Lenny the Zaleskis, Barry Davis, all these wrestling people that years earlier were like, knucklehead, listen to me. And I'm like, what do you mean? I got this all figured out, this life thing, right? And then you play like the barber at the barber shop that I went to only one time. It was closed, and I knocked on the window. I'm like, I need a haircut. I'm going to see my dad. I got to get my hair cut. And they're like, I'm closed. I'm like, I know, but I need a haircut. Can you open it? And they open the door and they let me in. And for 45 minutes, they talk about Christ. And I'm like, I'm never coming back to this barbershop, or the Greyhound bus. And the guy sits next to me for, a ride home from Iowa to New York, the longest ride of your life. And the guy's sharing the gospel with you. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to talk about the gospel. I'm just trying to relax. I'm just finished, fall semester. Leave me alone. And then, right. And then your heart is open to the reality of, listen, you don't have it figured out, guy. Why don't you just kind of shut up and learn something? And listen. And as soon as I started listening, it was like, wow, how did I miss this? But it was my time, right? It was my time.
My wife said something to us after we got married that's really stuck with me. She said that the lessons in life that keep facing us will continue to face us until we seek the understanding of what that lesson's supposed to teach us. And
that's pretty powerful. That was me for sure.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I wish there were ways to send virtual Kleenexes to everyone on this call. This is how there's a lot of coaches out here, Tom, that and Sarah and Mike, that aren't okay being vulnerable. They aren't yet okay talking about pain, admitting that sometimes life's just tougher than we can handle. Been there, right? We've all been there. We've had our experiences. What do you say to those coaches that are struggling to be vulnerable? And to Sarah and Tom, I would love to hear your perspectives. Obviously, Mike, anytime. How do you encourage folks to take that step and make that call to that person that's going to help you through, that's going to understand your pain?
Sarah, you want to jump on that?
Sure. I think it just all goes back to kind of 3D coaching. Why are you a coach if you don't want to touch these kids' lives and be there for them in their hardest moments, in that suffering, and love them? And so it's just really having a foundation and, again, knowing your why, and that helps you when you need to be vulnerable. You can go back to, like, if I have to make this decision, okay, this is my why. This is going to help, not complete, but work on that why. So I'm going to be vulnerable and I'm going to help this athlete.
Sarah, for the folks that don't know 3D, what is that program and how did you get involved?
Yeah, I actually did it, I think, at an NWCA convention back in 2016. And that was the first time I had ever heard of it. And I fell in love with it because it made sense. It was kind of my life already. And it's physical, mental, and heart, I believe. I don't know if those are the exact words, but those are the ones in my head. And really the physical is, creating these elite athletes, getting them to the best that they can be with their abilities and their talents. And mental is kind of getting them to love that process, is how I see it. And then the spiritual side is just knowing that there's life after athletics, is the way that I've implemented the 3D coaching into how I coach.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think, so to add on what Sarah just mentioned, it's like we have, everyone is, I guess we all become more fertile, for lack of a better word, right? When we're in the midst of pain, right? We're more, like I watch a lot more videotapes of I like to watch more when I won than when I lost, but it's in the losses, right, that we really learn the most, right? So in the pain, it's like, hey, I lost this match. What can I do to flip this thing around? And we have a saying that, right, it's really hard to reach people when they're walking, when their back's facing you, right, when they're walking away, right? I mean, I'm sure, I don't know, you guys, everyone's married. I get something, you have these conversations. The conversation was over, but I can't stop talking. Right? It's like she's walking away from like nothing is going to matter that I say at this point. Her back's to me, right? So the sayings are going to wait to they're facing you, right? And typically people face us more in the hard time, in the pain, and we've got to be ready we've got to take it serious. Like we have got to be ready to be there and know when those times are in our student athletes' lives and just be there, And if you're vulnerable yourself, right? I always say, right? And I mean, this is just simple truth. Example's the greatest teacher, right? It's the greatest teacher. And if we can't be examples of sharing pain and how we went through it, it's going to be tough for, others that look up to us to open up.
Coach Hagerty, I keep hearing this theory of this theme of time, right? Is it time that we want things quicker, but it takes time to develop? And time gives us a different perspective over situations, both positive and negative, and may make us commit. Where do you go with time?
Yeah, I think that there is a common theme. And I think, with experience and with age, certainly there is and some, let's face it, some people mature at different levels at different times and chronologically. But I know for me as a coach that I started coaching collegiately at a very young age and felt like I needed to have the answers. I needed to always know what was right for my athletes. If somebody came to me, if I didn't have an answer, I probably just made it up on the spot. So, but over time, I think that it's okay to be vulnerable and to say that I don't always have the answers. But I've learned, I think, with maturity that I can be a facilitator much more than just always have the answers, that I can help athletes find those answers, whether it's technical situations or whether it's life situations. To pretend to think that we all, as a one person, one human being, has the ability to answer all those questions, I think is just insane. And at some point, I don't know when it was, I sort of started to look at myself more as a facilitator than what I would say in a traditional sense of what a coach represents.
So with the three people here, because I know you three, I've either known you or I've seen you do this. When you facilitate these kind of environments, what does it do to the relationship with your athletes when you work with them, and how does this concept of time and how you give that time, how you work that, how does that impact and influence your relationships and your relationship with them? Right? Because that, Tom, you hit on so many things: belief and trust and communication and leadership and all of the things that you want all of your athletes to know, and all of those things take time. So what happens over this time that bonds us?
I mean, I think it's just, again, creates that trust. And one of my favorite quotes from Coach Ryan's book is actually, if parents and coaches don't provide this belonging, this love, then some other group will. So I think the time that we invest in them shows them the love that we have for them, and keeps them around,
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and Sarah, it's like right now, we're in the Wild West with transfer portal and NILs. It's it's an interesting time where you've got the three clashing forces of COVID years, right? People have more years than they've ever had, right, to wrestle. We're going on 5 and 6-time All-Americans now, and you've got the transfer portal is wide open, and then you've got the NIL, which makes it, somewhat of a nightmare, right? Or from an opportunity standpoint. And, I've always been a big fan of, look, if a coach can leave when he wants, I really do believe a student athlete should be able to leave, when he wants. And you hope that's not in the midst of being challenged by a coach in a good way, right? Where, he's being too hard on me, even though it's good for me, I'm going to find a new place anyway. But, so it really challenges us as coaches to do what, Sarah said, right? Which is, look, you got to build something deeper, right? They got to feel a sense of, connection, with you. So I think it's, it can no longer be, you can't leave because you can't leave. You can't leave because you don't want to leave, right? You're not leaving because you don't want to leave. You sense something here that's, greater than anywhere else. We've had a couple guys go in the portal, and we've helped them. It's not because they're not loved. It's just reality is that, hey, you're third or fourth deep. You're 3 or 4 deep. Really, maybe the best thing is for you, get to a good school, right? Another good school, and give yourself a chance to be in the lineup. Maybe that, that is what's best for you. So, but connection is really everything. At so many levels. It all boils back down to Mike in the top right. I got Mike in the top right and Mike in the top left. That's a trust, right? That sense of trust, that I trust this guy with my development, in every aspect of my life.
Tom, is it fair to say, in your estimation, that if coaches don't venture into this newness of what coaching represents, that they themselves and their programs could be at risk because of the lack of connection, and maybe if they're seen as just a mat coach? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think, just like the goodness in it is, look, the reality is that I need it for me. Like I need to grow. Like I need to improve. One of my I believes is, right, when a man thinks he's arrived, right, it's the start of his demise, right? We just never get there, and it's okay. it's okay living that way. You know, you're running these recruits. I'm sure Sarah, coach, you've seen it where you win the first state title, or you've made it to campus, right? You've made it to the college campus, and your mindset changes from an eager beaver, right? I want to learn. I want to watch video. You know, get me videotapes. I want to I'm sweet. You know, I'm sweet. Yeah, you can be sweet, but you got to keep arriving, right? You got to keep pressing on and keep doing exactly what it was that enables you to get to the level that you're at.
Is it ego that steps in the place? Right, things are working, and all that. Is that the word? Is it? What do you see? You both kind of giggled when you were talking about this, so I figure you both had.
You guys go ahead. Yeah, what do you think? I'm interested.
I mean, yeah, I think it's probably ego. I think kids don't realize that they get to college and it's a whole nother ladder. You don't just get there and you're on top. There's the 1% that do that. And so that's what I tell my kids all the time. That's what a coach told me when I was going into college. It's okay. It's a whole nother ladder. You got to keep climbing. You got to keep improving.
Coach, what do you think? Yeah.
Man, I tell you, that's a tough one because let's face it, it boils down to expectations. I think it really does. That we got to continually paint clear pathways for the athletes. And Tom, you know, I commend you for that direction and that, you know, sort of aiding your athletes. And if they do choose to go into the portal and acknowledge the time of where now that, you know, I remember my day, I certainly paid my dues, but at the same time, I think I had a coach that painted a pathway for me that indicated that, you know, if I stay, that I'm probably going to get rewarded for that opportunity. But at the same time, that may not be the right pathway for everyone. And, you know, so to me as a coach and somebody that has such at stake in this investment, to be able to clearly communicate what it looks like, you know, not just yesterday and today, but down the road for a person's career, that's huge. And for athletes to have that trust in you, to be able to help guide them in and out of your program if necessary. You know, we've had really good entry into our programs for sure with recruiting processes and everything. We've never really ever had to, I think, reach down deep and have exit strategies for our athletes. We all know that for most athletes, it's the exit strategy has been graduation, but that may not be the pathway now.
So Sarah, now if we're talking about our values and knowing our values, and that's going to help us make our decisions. Tom, you're saying that it sounds like the athlete is more important to you. Their experience is more important to you than having their hand raised or having your team title. And, you know, it'd be really nice to have this third, fourth stringer as an extra practice partner. And God forbid somebody's ineligible and somebody tweaks a knee. I've got my third stringer, right? It'd be real easy to hold on to these things because success is so often measured in how we finish and not the process in which we go through. I don't know, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really blessed with some awesome mentors in my life. When I was coaching in college, I had Brian Jackson was my head coach, and he was very much like that. He was about the athlete, what's best for them. So I was able to learn that early on. So I never really had the ego of holding on to an athlete. So I can't really compare it because I learned pretty quickly what the importance is of being there for the person, not the student athlete, you know. And even now in my job at the club, like our mission is to enrich lives of the wrestlers and their parents. So it's not about the success. We are enriching their lives, whatever that looks like individually in these families.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice when the symbiotic relationship is the best place for the athlete. The best situation for the athlete is the best situation for the coach, which is the best situation for the team, right? I mean, often, right, most times that's it, but there are times when that's not true. And I think that a team of mature people that are raised to listen intently, right, and have an opinion, that you can lose them quickly if when the best thing, for the athlete is completely compromised, right, by the coach. You can lose them too, right? And that's just something that as a coach you try to avoid at all costs. Why? That's not the way it is. And then it's a fine line, right? There's a fine line between, listen, this may not be perfect for you, but it's the best thing for the team and the organization and our group. So, it can get messy, right? It can get messy fast with, in that world. Well, who's it best for, right? So from a recruiting perspective, and we really look for people, right, that number one are just have high self-awareness, right? We've all probably been in organizations around people that just have no self-awareness, and they're disruptors, right? And we pray for them and hope that at some time they stop becoming a disruptor, because we know that no organization wants a disruptor in it. The book of Legacy is fantastic, right? The All Blacks, right? They look for the two questions, right? One, are you a jerk? And that's a tough term, right? But are you a jerk? And I'm using it as a disruptor. That's a nicer way of saying it, right? And then the second thing is, what are you willing to do for the team? Right? It's amazing, right? When you see teams that love each other and care about each other and want the best for each other. And, we're in a sport where it's a lot of me. I can be great. If my team stinks, I can still be great, and it's a tough dynamic to manage. And you fight against that force, but you got to keep fighting.
So it sounds like, Coach Hagerty, it sounds like this athlete-centered concept is really important. Something came up this past week out at the training center in Chula Vista. How much coach-centered time do we need to have? Because if the coach creates the environment for the athlete, and the athlete is what we need to focus on, if we're not taking care of the coach, how can the coach properly take care of the athlete? How can the coach properly create the environment? So, of course, you put a bunch of coach educators in a room, they're going to say, hey, we got to take care of our coaches. But we can't sacrifice our own coaching health and our own personal health to help athlete, right? It's like the airplane drops and the mask comes out. You got to put yours on before you put it on the next person. Otherwise, you're both passed out. How important is this coach-centered focus?
Mike, that's something that's big with me. Obviously, when I've had a chance to speak at the silver colleges and so on, it's usually about something in that vein, that coaches definitely need to spend more time taking care of themselves. I'm not real sure that most people really understand in my ideas of how it would work, that they really understand what it looks like to be able to take care of themselves. And Tom, you've obviously figured it out. I mean, and Sarah, you as well, to a great degree, because of your success speaks for itself. But the thing that has always concerned me is that we talk about it. We give a lot of lip service about coaches taking care of themselves, but I'm not real sure that the real message is getting out there. Maybe with more time, and maybe the newer generation of coaches that are more athlete centered than program driven or results driven. Maybe that will come. And I don't think that you have to sacrifice one for the other. I don't think that you have to sacrifice success program. As a matter of fact, I think it actually in the long term brings a lot more success to the program if you are athlete centered. But athlete centered means that you have to be, like you say, take care of yourself as coaches, and it has to permeate through the staff. It's not just, well, the head coach can do it, or an assistant coach can do it, but the rest of the team doesn't, or the rest of the coaching staff doesn't understand the concept of what that looks like. And everything from, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, all of these elements are absolutely crucial to develop. And I'll be the first to admit, when I first started coaching, that's not what it was about for me. I jumped into it, like I said early, and immediately wanted to try to see results. I wasn't taking good care of myself things around me were suffering. And, but with time, I think you sort of figure it out, like this isn't working. And the more that you tend to, I think, focus on the results, it seems to go in the opposite direction, that you take care of yourself, you take care of your athletes. I'm big with recovery. Obviously, that's something that I speak about with my health clients and so on. And recovery is so critical, and giving people mechanisms to recover. So again, that's my 2 cents for what it's worth. But if we don't really live up to those expectations of taking care of our coaches, we're going to suffer for it. And it's like any other profession. A lot of young coaches, I think, do get into it with those expectations of just going out and winning by teaching, outstanding singles and doubles, but they're not really touching the spirit of the athlete. It's going to be detrimental in the long run.
Sarah, Tom, what do you do to take care of yourselves? What are your recharges?
Me personally, I think it goes back to belief system, and I'm in a couple different Bible studies, and it's kind of, if you don't fill your cup up, you can't pour it out for others. That whole concept. So really, fellowship for me is a big one, and being able to talk with other coaches. A lot of my Bible studies are with fellow wrestling coaches. So
yeah, I would just reiterate. I think we're touching on something critically important, because, as a coach, you're so focused on everybody else. Their singling isn't good enough. This one's struggling in class, right? This one's having, family problems, right? And this one can't finish a high crotch, right? And this one's out of shape. And this one's weight classes, they're overweight. And you can get caught up, right? And you have to get caught up in managing each one. And it's very easy to lose sight of you. So I like to kill honeysuckle. I like to bike. I think Sarah and Mike both touched on this. It's like, you got to, and it goes back to what we started with in the call, right? You got to know your pricelessness, man. You got to know your belief system. Look, my kids matter, right? My kids matter. My staff, if their kids have a game, I expect you to be at it, right? It's just the way it is. You're going to give me way more. You're going to give the student athletes way more if you're focused in practice, and you can get out 5 or 10 minutes early to catch the game rather than stay the extra 5 or 10 minutes. Like, you just got to know your belief system, and you got to stick to it. I think the last thing that anyone that gets into coaching starts out thinking is, I'm going to win the nationals, and then knowing my family is going to be there to watch because I haven't been there for anybody, right? I mean, it's like the mountaintop should be filled with, this whole thinking of the mountaintop, it's lonely at the top. It should be the opposite, right? Right? It should be overflowing with love, right? When you get to the mountaintop. So, but it's, it sounds good to talk about it, but it's really tough to do it.
And I think, Mike, to go back to your original question, I think that we've all kind of come to this conclusion at some point, and both Tom and Sarah, you guys are great examples of this, is that you lead by example. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing those things, regardless of the verbal message is great, but if you're communicating all of those actions, whether it's a spiritual side or, again, taking care of yourself, I think your athletes see that. And they're gonna probably follow the lead on many of those things. So again, go back to that philosophy of coaching. It's always been, for me, it's about teaching athletes to become their own best coach, and eventually that just simply means that you get those 2 hours with them every day, but they've got 22 hours the other time to make decisions on their own, and that's huge. And so if they're not making those good decisions outside of the room, you can't spread yourself as a franchise coach for very far. Your tentacles don't reach very far. So I think that's huge as well.
Yeah. Hey, Mike on the left, Hagerty. It's like, Coach, I mean, we're blessed to have you as the coordinator for the Big Ten officials, right? You've had a chance to kind of be in meetings with me, and I need a lot. I mean, I need an enormous amount of people helping me. I mean, the number of mentors I have in my life is insane. Because I'm crazy and I need help, right? And that's why we need good people around us. We need truth tellers, right? And I think I was blessed to be at Ohio State, and the thing I would say I miscalculated, or didn't calculate, were the number of amazing people that would care about me, you know, and really, you know, care enough to tell you the truth, right? So, you know, for these young people that have it all figured out. I mean, I'm 52, going on 53, and I got like Sarah, man. We need Bible stuff. We need to be around a lot of people, right? Sarah's probably way better than me, but.
Hey, Sarah, I had a quick question for you. I was going to get to this. I mean, I don't want to run this too long, but certainly, why we've got two of the very best in the field, we want to pick your brains. But Sarah, after doing your book report, I was just sort of curious if you could grab one or two things that were the special lessons from Tom's book. I know that it was quite an inspiration to you. What would be one or two of those things that you could really identify to say this really touched me?
Yeah, I think the quote that I talked about earlier, the giving the kids a sense of belonging, it seems so simple, but I don't know why it just hit me so much harder. I think probably because it was in the midst of COVID and I wasn't seeing the athletes. But just doing everything that I can to give these kids a sense of belonging, whether they're my state champ or they're a first-year kid walking on the mat. That was a really big one for me, being able to, just touch lives of everyone that's put into my life, not just the ones that are going to create the success. And another one was definitely knowing that there is one truth. It's not, you know, our culture today, everyone speaks about having your own truth. And it's all kind of wishy-washy. And so just having the truth and being able to teach that to others and kind of base my why off of that truth.
Coach, and moving forward, I'm just kind of curious, after the success that you had as an athlete, both Sarah, I guess, and Tom, you can answer this question, but, and then as a coach, obviously the success that you've had, an accomplished author, et cetera, what's next? I mean, what do you really think about? I mean, you mentioned that you just got into your 50s and, you know, are you enjoying it as much as you once were at the time? You know, has anything changed? Where are you at right now? And what do you look forward to?
Sarah, you want to take that first? You want me to go?
Sure, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I mean, for me,
I know what's on your mind right now. You months or 2 weeks away.
Right.
Yeah, I'm 8.5 months pregnant, so I'm looking forward to second child and working through all that. And really, that's kind of a thing I struggle with every day is pride. There's so many women's programs popping up and I just like, I miss college so much. But I know God has me here at this club for a reason. So I don't know exactly what's next, but I know it's to serve him and serve others and love people. So.
And what a beautiful facility. What a great organization you guys have in Edwardsville. And man, kudos to everybody in that community that makes that place a great place for kids to come.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I can't sit still for a second. I'm excited about this group, right? We've got a great group of recruits coming in. The facility is gorgeous. You know, I know I've heard you have some grandchildren. I have my first grandchild on December 5th. So, you know, I have a written statement that, you know, I will be able to beat him when he's in high school, right? Which will be, you know, 18 years from now. So that keeps me on the bike. It keeps me wanting to stay fit and strong and mentally prepared for when this kid wants to whip grandpa.
I absolutely love that.
I love beauty. I get in my yard. I just want to make flowers grow. I want the place to look like heaven, my yard. So, you know, just spending time with my family. You know, we're in a group text. My whole family's in a group text. We're trying to plan, right? If it matters to you, you track it. It's pretty simple, right? So time with them matters. So they're all busy. I've got 3 kids on, you know, earth, 1 in heaven. They're all making plans. And it's like, look, don't make plans without mom and I. Like, we're all planning together. So where are we going this summer? Where can we get away? How long do you have? What dates are available? The old Google Doodle. I think that's what you call it. I'm not techie, but yeah. So life's just full of amazing things. So I'm like a kid in a candy store. I want to be alive a lot longer to watch my kids and grandkids do big things and coach this team. We want to beat Penn State too. That's the plan. We're going to beat Penn State. So Cale does an amazing job in his staff and a lot of other staffs as well. But, I feel like I've got like this piece of stick that's about 4 feet out. And I love peanut butter and chocolate ice cream. And it's like dangling there, and I'm just trying to taste it. That's Cale. I just want to eat that peanut butter and chocolate, and I just can't get to it. But we're going to get to it. And, so lots going on, lots of things to look forward to getting up early about.
Well, I tell you, another thing that accomplishment that we really didn't even mention, as you just alluded to, Tom, was the facility that has been built at Ohio State, and your input on that and what you had to do to get that up and running. What an accomplishment. I fortunately did get to officiate at that facility once, and it's absolutely an amazing place.
Pure love, my brother. It was all about love, man. These people that did well in life and just, jumped alongside the big dream, and really fortunate. I mean, all given by, families that did well, and just love the sport and love what we're doing. So we're pretty blessed to be in it.
Very special. And I would venture out to say there's not, between Sarah, your facility, and Tom, your facility, you guys are sort of like the top of the rung on this.
Living large.
Good for us. We like being on top.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I think we could call it a wrap for this one, but man, this has just been absolutely amazing to have a chance to visit with you guys, and you share about things that are so relevant right now, especially in this time and age of where we're at, coming out of post-COVID, everything else. So I highly recommend everybody out in our audience, and we do speak a lot to the coaches that are out there. Hopefully they'll get a chance to pick up your book. And Sarah, thanks so much for you sharing your information in regards to the report and what you did and what you took away from the book. So Mike, I'll kind of lean into you to kind of wrap this thing up. I know we do have the U.S. Open coming up here real soon. We've got World Team Trials in a little over a month away. A lot of things happening. So what about coaches' education and other things at USA Wrestling you can share with us? We
got a new logo. How about that? We've updated our logo. It's really cool. You'll have to go. I'll put some stuff down in the description. You guys can do some links. I'm going to make sure to put some other links down here too. Tom's book for sure. Other coach education stuff. Our next Silver College is going to be May 19th and May 20th. It's going to be in Coralville, Iowa, right before the World Team Trials. So what an opportunity for coaches to come in. If you've got your copper and your bronze, come in, knock out your Silver College, stick around, go to the World Team Trials, check that out. We're going to be down at the U.S. Open with the Greg Strobel Leadership Academy, presenting an award to the Athlete Advisory Council, their first ever leadership award. So it's recognizing senior team athletes that are really going above and beyond, helping to drive the mission, vision, and values of USA Wrestling. So that's going to be great. Jen Baldwin and members of her family are going to be there. And I will definitely throw to Tom and Sarah and Mike for sure. In Fargo this year, we're going to do a coach well-being station. And we don't know exactly what that looks like or what that plan is going to be, but it might be, hey, you're on the way into the gym and I know there's a big social component sometimes to Fargo, but here's a granola bar and a Gatorade, right? You start the day off with something, in your belly, healthy, get moving. And maybe we do some meditation and some yoga. And I found that both of those, when I practice the meditation and I practice the yoga, when I'm mindful about those things, I get so much more back than just that short amount of time. And it lasts a lot longer than other things that I go to. So for me, those would be a couple of the well-being pieces that I would love to share, and we will share because we'll be doing some of that stuff in Fargo with folks in the middle of July in the North Dakota heat and mosquitoes. So come out and hang out with us.
Well, thanks,
and you're
Mike.
all welcome to Columbus. I know Sarah, your sister-in-law is here. Come check out the facility. When
I need to come.
Bring those little rugrats you got. We'll roll around a little bit.
I'd love to.
Tom, we could always talk some calls like during the season, go back and kind of relive some of those and let you share my.
That sounds good.
Well, guys, thanks again for joining us. Mike, again, always a pleasure. Appreciate you guys so much. And this has been Mike Hagerty, Mike Clayton, Tom Ryan, Sarah Doty with our Heads Up podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.
Which is really